Good morning, IWAC. Good morning, Colorado. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Thanks to Mike Palmquist for the invitation to set up an Asia Roundtable for IWAC 2020. What a delight to be able to join IWAC and share with you some of the WAC-related developments in Asia. I am Julia Chen, Director of the Educational Development Center at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University in Hong Kong. Together with me at this Asia Roundtable are Yuen Yi Lo from the University of Hong Kong, Kyungsook Yeum from Sukmyung Women's University in South Korea, Judy Noguchi from Kobe Gakuin University in Japan, and Gene Navera from the National University of Singapore. I will first briefly describe the English learning situation at university level in our part of the world, and the gap that WAC can begin to fill in the undergraduate curriculum. Then I'll pass the time to Yuen Yi to talk about how she has been doing CLIL, content and language integrated learning with school teachers. And then to Kyungsook on her CLIL curriculum to enhance Korean college students' market competitiveness, before Judy talks about proposing a genre-based approach to university English learning in Japan. And finally, Gene will share his experience of developing content-specific and at the same time rhetorically intensive modules for Singaporean students. Many countries in Asia offer English courses at school and university levels. English is considered a prescription for economic well-being. Concepts such as globalization and internationalization have encouraged the learning of English for an increased connection with the world. English is like a lingua franca between the nations of Asia. And English ability and proficiency has become an important issue in most East Asian countries. Bolton and Bacon-Shawn had a 2020 chapter on the statistics of English across Asia. In that chapter, they divided Asian countries into two English-using societies. They called the first group, as you can see here, the outer circle, where English is often used as a second language, and many of these countries or regions used to be British colonies. And they call the second group the expanding circle, where English traditionally has the status of a foreign language. You will see from this table in front of you, as well as the next table, which are taken from that chapter, the approximate number of people who use English in these Asian regions and countries. So this one is the outer circle, and this is the expanding circle. But of course, not all who use English are proficient in English. In Hong Kong, a survey on the opinions of employers on major aspects of performance of first-degree graduates in 2016 showed that out of 43 attributes, 2 of the top 5 attributes that Hong Kong employers perceived as most important were expression of ideas and comprehension of verbal and written communication. However, there were gaps between what employers perceived as important and what they perceived as the actual performance of university graduates. As you can see in the table here, the score that employers gave to university graduates' language proficiency is lower than the score they gave to the importance of language. So what do Hong Kong universities do to improve students' language proficiencies? Most universities offer compulsory academic English subjects in Year 1 or Year 2. Many of these are generic academic English subjects, or what the literature calls EGAP. EGAP stands for English for General Academic Purposes. If you're interested in finding out more about English taught or how English is taught in Asian institutions, one of the books I would recommend is edited by Professor Terauchi, Professor Noguchi, and Professor Tajino. The book is listed here on this slide. In fact, Judy Noguchi is one of the speakers of this Asia Roundtable, and you will hear her talk later on. I have a chapter in this book as well on how the political and policy changes in Hong Kong have shaped the development of academic English training at university level. But just taking 1, 2, or 3 English courses that last less than 40 hours each is not enough, not even in universities where English is used as the medium of instruction, what we call EMI. In EMI institutions, content subjects are taught in English, but language use is not generally considered a part of learning content, and literacy in the disciplines is not really developed much. So, seeing these three limitations, number one, the inadequacy of 1 or 2 compulsory academic English courses to improve students' language proficiency. 2, limited curriculum space to have more standalone English proficiency or writing courses. And 3, students' lack of transfer of generic EAP skills in writing assignments for other courses means that many teachers have actually been thinking of looking for alternative ways to give students more exposure to English, especially English related to the disciplines or to students' major studies. And this is where WAC, EAC, English across the curriculum, or CLIL, content and language integrated learning, come in. With the belief that content and language create a symbiotic relationship, some schools and universities in Asia begin to develop CLIL, content and language integrated learning, in content subjects to help students learn both the content and the language appropriate to that content. That is a strong double focus on both content and language within the same course. But CLIL is not easy at all. Finding suitable teachers who can teach both the content and the language is a challenge. And for courses to change from being focused on content only to a dual and equal focus on content and language means sometimes a rewrite of the courses. But it is not always possible to rewrite courses. And content teachers may not want to give away a lot of their course hours to be spent on language. So some institutions in Asia try EAC instead. EAC stands for English Across the Curriculum, which is modeled after WAC. EAC introduces some language and literacy elements in content courses without disrupting the flow of the content courses and without changing much of the course design or its outcomes. EAC brings together English teachers and academic faculty to help students write better in course-embedded assessments. Faculty often feel frustrated with their students' poor writing or oral presentations, but they do not know how to address those problems. And many academic faculty, being non-native speakers themselves, or non-native speakers of English themselves, feel that they are not in a position to fix their students' English. So in EAC, English teachers pair up with faculty academics to design resources that draw students' attention to the discipline genres and to academic literacy features. Now, since EAC is already the main topic of 2 other panels in this year's IWAC, the 2 panels being one led by Professor Terry Zawacki with 2 panelists from Hong Kong, and the other being a panel of teachers from 5 different universities in Hong Kong on how we try to do EAC via a mobile app, we will not go into detail about EAC here in this Asia Roundtable. Rather, I will now pass the time to the next speaker, Dr. Yuen Yi Lo, who will talk about how she has been scaffolding EFL learners to acquire academic literacies. Yuen Yi, please. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Yuen Yi Lo from the University of Hong Kong. In this paper, I'm going to talk about how teachers can scaffold English foreign language learners to master academic literacies. I'll discuss both effectiveness and tensions involved. Let's start with some background and literature review. Content and Language Integrated Learning, CLIL, refers to any type of pedagogical approach that integrates the teaching and learning of content and second, foreign, or additional language, that is L2. Here, the language involved is L2 and also academic language, which is quite different from everyday language that students are more familiar with. Hence, CLIL imposes difficulties on L2 learners, and is essential for teachers to integrate content and language teaching in CLIL lessons. But then the question remains how teachers can do this effectively. Here comes the potential of genre-based pedagogy and also genre theory. For example, when one analyzes the text involved in science discipline, we will find the language features, including some abstract subject-specific nouns, nominalization, and the use of passive voice. And the genres involved are usually procedures, procedural recounts, reports, and explanation text. By identifying the features and also the typical genres involved in a discipline, teachers are in a better position to incorporate language teaching during the process of knowledge construction in content subject lessons. In our projects, we are adopting the teaching and learning cycle of the Sydney School as the framework for practicing genre-based pedagogy. As you see in the figure, it involves 3 major stages: deconstruction, joint construction, and independent construction, so that teachers can provide scaffolding in both content and academic literacies for students' independent construction in the last stage. We have conducted some projects in the context of Hong Kong secondary schools, and the aims of these projects were to examine the potential impact of genre-based pedagogy on the development of students' academic literacies. We also wanted to explore teachers' beliefs, especially content subject teachers' beliefs and attitudes towards genre-based pedagogy. By doing so, we hoped to provide some implications for CLIL pedagogy and also the practice of language across the curriculum. I'm going to share the findings of 2 projects. In this first project, we worked with 1 integrated humanities teacher in 2 classes of grade 8 students in Hong Kong. So these students were 13 to 14 years old, and they were learning the history topic of Renaissance. And in Hong Kong secondary schools, English is used as the medium of instruction for some or all subjects. In this project, the research design was more like a run group evaluation with pre-test, intervention, and post-test. We tried to examine the impact of genre-based pedagogy on students' content knowledge and academic literacies in L2, operationalized by their use and understanding of academic vocabulary, grammatical features, sentence patterns, and also the text structure. In the pre-test and post-test, the students were asked to write an essay, exposition text, or one-sided argument. They were learning 2 history periods, and they were asked to choose the most influential achievement of those periods and argue for that. Here are the materials that we designed together with the teacher based on the genre-based pedagogy. In the first stage, we asked students to identify the 4 stages involved in an exposition text based on the analysis of a sample writing. And in the second stage, we drew students' attention to the language features in different stages of the writing. For example, the sentence patterns when doing definition, and the different tenses used in different stages. And in the joint construction part, students were asked to brainstorm the ideas for their essay in groups and receive some feedback from the teacher. And finally, they were asked to write the essay on their own as homework. These are the assessment rubrics we used in this project when marking students' essays. As you can see, we have both content and language aspects to see students' development in these 2 dimensions. This graph shows the pre-test and post-test scores of the 2 classes. It should be noted that both classes experienced the intervention, that is genre-based pedagogy. We included both classes so as to see the differential impact of genre-based pedagogy on different students, because according to the teacher, class 2 was slightly weaker. As you can see, both classes experienced an increase in the score of their essay from the pre-test to the post-test, and the increase was statistically significant. To further illustrate how students made improvement, I chose the pre-test and post-test of 1 student. As you can see, this student made significant improvement in the structure of the essay so as to present his argument more clearly. And as highlighted in the post-test, This student made use of some sentence patterns and also connectives to express his ideas clearly. And these patterns were actually covered in the genre-based pedagogy in the lesson. When it comes to the teacher's beliefs about practicing genre-based pedagogy in her lesson, she found it generally beneficial to the students, especially the less able ones, because they were more aware of what they need to write and how to structure their essay. But then, the practice of genre-based pedagogy took slightly more time than her expectation. So she suggested focusing on only 1 to 2 genres in each year, and then these genres were recycled so that students could transfer the genre knowledge to different topics. In the second project, we worked with some science teachers teaching 4 classes of grade 8 students in a Hong Kong secondary school. This project is more like a collaborative action research, with the teachers identifying the issues, that is, students' mastery of academic literacies, developing the action, that is, genre-based pedagogy materials together with the researchers, and then evaluating and reflecting on the experience. The target genre involved in this project was sequential explanation. That is, students were asked to explain the process or the stages involved in the breathing mechanism, breathing in and breathing out. These are some examples of the designed materials. There are 4 main activities in this package. In the first activity, students were asked to focus on the actions and also the body parts involved in the breathing mechanism. In the second activity, students were asked to describe the process of breathing mechanism with the help of the flowchart. Then, they were asked to reorder some phrases or words in the jumbled sentence activity. Finally, they were asked to write a short text, a short paragraph to describe the breathing in and breathing out mechanism. Here are the results. Based on the student sample work in class, we could see that students could handle how to write a short paragraph. For some students, they may have forgotten the use of some connectives like at the same time, therefore, etc., and they received some feedback from the teachers. In a summative test conducted 1 or 2 months after the intervention, the same question appeared in the paper, and you could see that students still remembered how to express their ideas, that is, how to describe the breathing in mechanism in a sequential explanation text. When we interviewed the teachers, they found the materials useful and effective, especially for students who were weaker. They could still express their ideas. They especially appreciated the design of the flowchart, which highlighted some keywords or phrases for students to connect their ideas. However, they also expressed some concerns over time, that is, the time required for the intensive language support, and they also required some extra preparation to connect language and content in their lesson. To conclude, incorporating language support into content lessons, that is the idea of CLIL, is necessary and effective. The notions of genres and genre-based pedagogy could actually provide useful framework for CLIL or language across the curriculum. Some content subject teachers are concerned about their knowledge and strategies related to language teaching and the extra time required. That speaks to the potential of cross-curricular collaboration. Thank you very much.
I'm honored to be a part of this Asia Roundtable session at the IWAC 2021 International Conference. In fact, at our university, we launched a new English program, a CLIL approach, to meet the increasing demand of more professional use of English. So I can summarize our purposes like this. So we wanted to enhance the educational value and we wanted to ensure our curriculum sustainability, and we wanted to enhance our students' global competence, and in that way we wanted help them to secure better jobs in the global market. And today I'm going to summarize briefly 3 developmental stages that we went through, how we created and implemented our new curriculum, and what we did to standardize it, and for further systemic adjustment, what we have been doing, in short, for quality control. ACE is short for Academic and Communicative English Program. And to replace our old General English program, we implemented this new curriculum, and it provides 5 different tracks to meet students' interest and to meet the needs for their majors. So ETE, English for Technology and Engineering, and then for others, for example, English for Tourism and Culture, English for Business and Management, English for Global Media. But we maintained ECB for Communication Basics for lower level students. So in each track, we provide 3 different levels from pre-intermediate, intermediate, and the mix of high intermediate and advanced levels. So students, once they sign up for the track, they will be placed for the right level course. And before we implemented the new curriculum, we did some pilot testing, and some professors and students got involved. We wanted to know what works or what doesn't work. But most importantly, we wanted to make sure that, the last question at the bottom, does the CFR level of the textbook match what we know of as a level 2 students at our campus? So, once we implemented our program, or even before, we organized ACE committees, and as you see in the chart, faculty members who taught the same level course, particularly level 2, in the same track, we put them together. In that way, we wanted each committee started working on commonalities in terms of language, target language goals, or the midterm final tasks or assignments or whatever. So in fact, we had 18 foreign faculty members, native speakers, and 2 coordinators and I selected course textbooks among ESP commercial textbooks, and at the same time we wrote guidelines including the level criteria. So any of the faculty members were asked to create 1 level course curriculum. So this is an opportunity for them to get together and to check lots of issues. Once we implemented our program in March 2020, we organized tech committee as well. So among the faculty members, if they were involved in any kind of tech project, or if they are tech savvy, I mean, they were invited for a cyberspace construction. It's like building a space, special space for our own students. We wanted to, ensure if our students are allowed to get access to lots of useful materials and resources. Even we asked each faculty members to collect exemplary video samples for our students' final project. So if you see this screen, I mean, once our students click our cyberspace, they will have to click their track and then their level. Then it will guide you, it will allow access to their own course. And there are many different spaces for source materials, and on your right side you can see particularly this space for our students, previous semester students, presentation materials or discussion samples or practice samples here. Of course, we got a permission from some high-performing students so that we could share their samples with future students. I mean, some students who are willing, under the condition that it will be used only within our cyberspace. So, in addition to our curricular expansion by creating our cyberspace, we wanted to check about standardized quality of education, particularly in the first semester. Due to the pandemic, all the classes were conducted in online, partially virtual, or through videotaped version. So we asked them to submit a videotape class for their 7th week of the semester. And as we expected, we could see a wide range of performances among faculty members. Natural, I mean, it was their first semester, and some faculty members even showed quite unsatisfactory performances. We could see really deviation from the norms and our expectations. That's why we decided, 3 of us, 2 coordinators and me, we decided to identify some exemplary aha moments for special categories. As you see, we put together certain minutes of exemplary case and several faculty members' performances. And in that way, we ended up creating 40 minutes of effective teaching practice video, and it was shared among all the faculty members at the end of the semester. Of course, those faculty members allowed us to use some, simple, short video clips from their own performance video. So everything worked out great, and all the faculty members learned from each other. So it was like a learning procedure, and we used it as an opportunity for faculty workshop at the end of the semester. And we continued to create effective teaching practice video each semester. And now, for the future direction, by the end of 2022, I would like to see some sort of more autonomy given to all the faculty members. By that time, I think instead of us coordinators watching them, I mean, we could make it a peer group review session, and hopefully, some years later, I mean, they may not even need any kind of observation. It'll be a really success story, and by the end of 2022, we want to see more commonalities at each level course across the tracks in terms of language skills, language outcomes, target tasks, or whatever. And at the same time, we want to see a logical progression from level 1 up to level 3 in each track, in terms of target language goals or content density and challenging level. So you understand that we need to continue to work on standardization, but still, up to now, I think thanks to all faculty members' collaborative work and dedication, we have accomplished our mission to some extent. So hopefully some educators and administrators could gain some insight through our case, and I'll be happy to clarify if you have any questions. Thank you.
It is indeed a great pleasure to be able to present at this symposium with my Asian colleagues. Today, I will be talking about disseminating EAP, English for academic purposes, and ESP, English for specific purposes in Japan, proposing a genre-based approach to overcome barriers. Unfortunately, Japan is rather well known for its poor performance on English proficiency exams. But Newman has pointed out that Japan is an insular culture. Its large internal market makes English unnecessary for most people during their lifetime. And there are problems with educational policy where there is too much emphasis on passing university entrance exams. Of course, the Minister of Education, Culture, Sports, Science, and Technology, MEXT for short, has not been idle. In 2016, they introduced their third round of projects aimed at further internationalizing Japanese universities. This time, they're emphasizing more English medium instruction. They've selected universities to compete for ranking in the top 100 internationally, and other universities to provide models for internationalization of the Japanese society. Of course, there's always a gap between policy and practice. There are differences in implementation at institutional and classroom level. Rapid implementation of EMI is difficult. Insufficient professional development of lectures, and the need for supplementary English courses for domestic students. In searching for a solution, those of us who have been involved in ESP realized very early on that rather than try to teach the whole language, we should instead focus on the registers that our students need. More recently, in 2003, Sociolinguistic Blumart pointed out that we should move from capital L languages to small L language varieties and repertoires, because it is the specific registers that fulfill the lingua franca functions that our students need. In working to disseminate ESP concepts and methods, JASIT, the Japan Association of College English Teachers, has been very active, publishing 3 volumes related to this. The first 2 were published in Japanese and describe ESP theory and practice. The second one, applications, and the third one was published in English, moving on to recent trends in CLIL, content and language integrated learning, EMI, and TBLT, task-based language teaching. Other organizations, JALT, the Japan Association for Language Teaching, has 6 and offer ESP-oriented symposia. The ICLHE, Integrating Content and Language in Higher Education, based in the Netherlands, has affiliate groups in various regions, and the East Asia affiliate has been offering symposia on these topics. In our 2019 volume, Iijima et al. Outlined the problems in development of tertiary education in Japan. They do note a slow but significant movement away from EGP to ESP or EAP. But the progress is slow because Japanese is the dominant language of instruction. Large-scale core curriculum reform is a formidable undertaking. There are few venues for professional EAP teacher training in Japan, and there is a lack of holistic frameworks to guide the necessary changes. While I'd like to give you some specific examples of ESP-EAP practice and research at Japanese universities, I've worked with high school students, undergraduates at university, and graduate students. These courses here are at the graduate school level. One is for e-learning for master's degree engineering students. This course has been offered since 2002 with an enrollment of about 400 to 500 students every year. It's a 12-week course designed to raise awareness of rhetorical patterns and word usage in research articles. The other course is a doctoral level course for medical researchers. This has been offered since 2008, and it includes not only listening and speaking and writing up of research, but the processes involved in professional text construction, including how to use corpus linguistics and online tools. As for the research, we have been comparing Japanese and American engineering lectures based on linguistic analyses. We built corpora of American and Japanese lectures to aid both the lecturers and the students. But this led us to discover that there are cultural differences. The Japanese lectures tended to be more teacher-centered with personal transmission of knowledge, whereas the American lectures aimed for a more inductive learning style. This led us to use the legitimation code theory to examine knowledge-building processes in these lectures. This is the lecture interface. The lectures can be accessed through this, and as you can see, we have a section on pedagogical function. A Japanese disciplinary lecturer who wants to talk about engineering could find out how to present thought experiments or how to frame content by using the pedagogical function search. These are the words and phrases that a lecturer could use. So now let's take a look at the LCT analysis, the legitimation code theory analysis. It was revealing in that the Japanese lectures were found to remain at the upper 2 quadrants, being rather abstract, whereas the American lectures tended toward the right side, meaning that they moved from real-world examples toward the abstract concepts. So there was a difference in how the knowledge building was pursued. So in trying to resolve the problems pointed out by Iijima, we go back and see that Japanese is the dominant language of instruction, but the differences in knowledge building processes means that perhaps more research is needed along these lines. The large-scale curriculum reform is formidable. MEX is offering a lot of incentives for universities to change, but we would like to question whether or not EMI is really the only way forward. There are a few venues for professional EAP training in Japan right now, but training programs are underway, and the implementation of many EAP-ESP courses means that there's a lot of opportunity for on-the-job training for instructors. There's also Yeum also points out a lack of holistic frameworks, but we would like to point out that a half a century of research and development in ESP can offer an effective framework to help learners acquire the language genres that they need. And LCT can reveal knowledge building processes. So I would like to conclude by saying that a genre-based pedagogy can help raise the language proficiency of Japanese who need to use English for professional purposes, because it makes possible a heuristic approach that can be adapted to meet new genres as they are encountered. It can help content instructors better grasp the global communication needs of their disciplines. And it also allows for the acceptance of different education styles that exist between Japan and the West. These are the references. And thank you very much for listening.
Good evening. I'm Gene Navera from the National University of Singapore. In the next 10 minutes, I will be sharing with you my reflections in teaching ideas and exposition modules, or IEM. These are content-specific, rhetorically intensive modules that are offered to undergraduate students in the residential college programs of our university. My presentation is divided into 4 parts. First, I would like to briefly talk about the ecology of English language communication and writing modules at NUS. This will hopefully give you a picture of the broad context within which we offer our ideas and exposition modules. Then I will zero in on IEM and offer you some pertinent information on how these modules work. I will then express some of the challenges that we face while teaching these modules, and then cap the presentation with an articulation of our response to these challenges and my own reflections as a lecturer of IEM. Now, our courses are framed within the Able Communicator initiative that views writing and communication courses not from a deficit model, but from an abundance model. While we do have proficiency courses that address specific English language needs of students from EFL contexts, a large number of our students are proficient in English. Most of our courses then are aimed at developing their academic literacy and preparing them for the workplace context. Part of these courses are the content-based writing modules, which adopt the CLIL model in writing instruction. These are what we call IEM, or Ideas and Exposition modules. Ideas and Exposition modules, as I mentioned earlier, are content-specific, rhetorically intensive modules that are offered to residential colleges of the university town, which adopts the living and learning model in the university setting. IEM comes in 2 tiers. The first tier is an expository writing module, while the second tier is a research writing module. Now, here are some examples of the expository writing modules that we offer. Students in this module write a reflective summary, a comparative essay, and an expository essay on the content covered in the module. The content basically shapes the discourse practices that students adopt in their writing. These discourse practices remind the students that writing is contextual and is carried out for a specific audience in mind. The level 2 modules are research writing modules that require students to do a collaborative annotated bibliography, a research pitch, and a research paper. The tasks are interrelated in that the earlier assignments serve as a scaffold for the more complex tasks expected of students in the latter half of the semester. Overall, our modules in both levels congregate towards broad themes or domains that foster intellectual curiosity, criticality, and social responsibility among our students. One thing to note about these modules is that the lecturers themselves are considered experts in these various topical foci. They are academically invested in these areas, as they actively research and write about these fields. When they assess the students' papers then, they can field questions and suggest readings that the students can use for their own scholarly engagement. As they learn new content, students in IEM get acquainted with core strategies that they need to be able to write effective scholarly papers. The learning objectives of both IEM 1 and IEM 2 enable content specificity, while allowing the lecturers to focus on academic writing conventions. At this point, I wish to talk about the challenges that we face when teaching IEM. I focus on two challenges in this presentation. First, we ask ourselves, how can we maintain a common standard while allowing flexibility and differentiation among various individual modules in the program? The second question is the more common one. How do we strike a balance between content and writing instruction? In responding to these challenges, we do the following. We negotiate within the team to articulate our commonality. While doing so, we also agree to enable the uniqueness and diversity of our modules to flourish. In negotiating towards our commonality, lecturers who come from various disciplinal and pedagogical backgrounds have worked towards implementing a common framework for IEM while maintaining the uniqueness of each module. In relation to point 1, we have adopted a parent-child model for the modules. Our modules are bound by the same framework, the same learning objectives, and the same assessment scheme, but each lecturer is allowed to adjust the prompts based on the content she is teaching. This slide shows the common pedagogical framework that undergirds our individual modules. We adopt a content-specific rhetorically intensive model. Our modules are grounded on the principles of content-based writing and communication instruction. They are informed by theories in rhetoric and composition, critical thinking, and argumentation. And while our modules tend to have disciplinal anchors, we also foster interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary perspectives, especially when our students start to write their individual projects. In negotiating to enable the uniqueness and diversity of our modules to thrive, each lecturer is encouraged to create their intricate designs within the tapestry of the ideas and exposition program. We individually develop materials and identify tools for analysis based on the discourse practices of the disciplinal content. And we individually determine our citation lines by carefully selecting and curating readings appropriate for our respective modules. Finally, I would like to talk briefly about my own experience teaching IEM by drawing your attention to a tool that I use in bridging content and writing instruction. I teach a research writing module that is focused on discourse, citizenship, and society. In my module, students write about citizens or how citizens and their leaders mobilize language and other symbols to negotiate social reality. I try to accomplish both content and writing instruction through tools such as this matrix, where students are introduced to levels of topical analysis that could guide them into identifying viable topics for their individual investigation. As they need to be individually invested in their topics of research, I begin by asking them what social topics they wish to explore in the module. This is then followed by probing questions that interrogate the specific discursive acts or cases that they can possibly study, the specific angle that they can adopt to study those cases, what keywords they need in order to explore related scholarship, and finally, the link towards citizenship, one important through line of the module. This matrix illustrates how both content and writing instruction can mesh, because as students are guided to think about their specific interests more deeply, they are also introduced to writing and research practices that they will find useful even beyond the module.
Thank you to Yuen Yi, Kyungsook, Judy, and Gene for your sharing. We now open the floor for discussions. Thank you very much.